To all those people out there who say that busy moms of many young children can't take on boot making as a creative hobby, I'm about to prove you wrong. Or maybe I'm about to prove you right. I have 5 kids, an untrained puppy, I'm starting a new hair oil business, so I thought, why not make a pair of vintage-inspired, highly intricate boots using advanced tools and techniques that I have never used before? What could possibly go wrong? Okay, so I'm at my studio today. I brought my little son with me. He's just playing outside for now, and I'm going to work on getting this black, it's called glacé leather cutout. It's very thin, which is great for making historical boots, but it has that patent leather look. Let's get this unrolled and laid out. So this is goat leather, so it's a fairly small hide. I actually think it's kid leather. When I was 7, there was a museum exhibit in the Royal Ontario Museum. What it was these elaborate 18th century dresses and shoes, all made out of tissue paper, painted tissue paper. My 7-year-old self looked at those and thought, I need to do that. I need to make historical shoes and historical clothes just like that. I spent literally 9 hours in my dad's shed one day working on making a pair of ballet toe shoes out of duct tape. Okay, so I've got all of my pieces traced out onto the leather. If you hear any noises in the background, my son is in here right now. He promised to be quiet, but he is only 3. So let's start cutting and I'll continue my big story about creativity. Rita Brown, who was one of the creators of the items in the exhibit, herself got married at 19, had a couple kids fairly early on, and wasn't able to study fashion or design formally, which interestingly enough ended up being my own story, but we'll get to that a bit later. It was at that point in my life where I really started to feel like I'm a lot different than most people. I don't really want the same things most people seem to want, but that is totally okay. Show detail. Hi, Job.
Hi.
Hi, Edward. Okay, so I've cut out most of my black leather pieces, and so now I'm just going to start cutting out the lining out of this cotton twill. Yeah, so back to a bit of the story that I was telling earlier about when I stayed home after high school to basically do my own course of study of classic oil portraiture. I was so excited about it. I was very disciplined. If anything, I was a little bit too disciplined, and it quickly began to kind of sap the joy out of it for me. It's time to bring out the Italian veg-tanned Badalassi Carlo leather. This was kindly sent to me by the amazing Rocky Mountain Leather Supply store. I highly recommend checking them out. I'll have the link for you in the description. The great thing about Rocky Mountain too is that they will split. They offer complimentary splitting services, which means they can get the leather to the exact thinness that you want. I'm still very much like a baby shoemaker, and I find that when I am new at any skill, I tend to agonize over all of the details. There's so many different things I want to try. And then what color is it going to be? Because what first put me on to making these Russian boots was a very talented shoe and boot maker, historical shoemaker here on YouTube, Nicole Rudolph, and she actually made a pair of Russian boots in black and red, and I just fell so in love with them and with that color combination that as much as I had that inner critic telling me like, you can't copy those same colors, I was just like, oh, but I love them so much. So thank you, Nicole, for the inspiration. I have been wanting to get a Mozart knife like this since I first knew that shoemaking was a thing, and I saw people on YouTube with them. And thanks to Rocky Mountain Leather, they did also supply me with this beautiful knife. It's just cutting through this leather like it's butter, which is what you want when you're doing these precise shaped cutouts and things. Daughter Leia is sleeping on my back, so I'm just gonna go lay her down. She has also not been sleeping too great lately, so yeah, just a lot going on. Anyway, let's get into the day here.
dinosaur.
Are you guys gonna help with the cleanup now? Kitchen still needs to be cleaned up. This seems to just be taking like forever lately. So my dad just gave me this knife of his. It's a Japanese steel, very angled knife, and he just sharpened it for me. So he says it's dangerously sharp, which is exactly what I want for skiving. So skiving is basically just where you shave off some of the leather within what will be the seam allowance, where like the two edges will be sewn together. I have never used this knife before. It's much steeper of an angle than I'm used to, but it's very sharp, which is great. I might have to refresh myself on how to best hold a knife. I'm still learning, and it seems like whenever I get the hang of it in a shoemaking project, then I quickly forget because I'm not making shoes every day. It's Monday morning. We've made it to the studio despite the time change. I'm ready to begin folding over the edges of one of these red straps. If you can see these pen markings, that is where the finished straps will be stitched onto this side part of the boot. So I've already gotten this glued. You need to snip to allow the leather to be able to fold under neatly. So back to the story I was telling about the year that I took off for art. It wasn't quite as idyllic as I'd hoped it would be. During that year, I developed a pretty serious, what felt pretty serious anxiety issue, along with a hefty dose of teenage existential depression, really, like wondering what I was gonna do with my life, feeling like, I don't know, like nothing was really the right fit for me, I guess. However, during this time, I really had done a deep dive into basically setting up a course, like my own kind of teaching program, teaching myself to do realistic classical art. And unfortunately, I came to kind of associate art with those struggles that I was going through. And a big part of the problem, I think, was that I was pushing myself too hard and becoming a little too like OCD about wanting to make sure I was doing everything right. And it started to feel more like a chore than like something I was loving doing. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same folding under of this edge on what's called the vamp. The vamp is basically the toe area of the shoe. And historically, I've had the most difficulty with this particular piece of the shoe. This is just a water-based contact cement. And I really like using it for pretty much every portion of shoemaking except for gluing on the soles if I'm doing a cemented shoe construction, because I really like using the strong stuff for that. So I've never actually made a pair of shoes yet with broguing. I'm a little bit scared, to be honest, because as you can see, the broguing needs to be quite close to the edge, and there's going to need to be stitching between the edge and these holes. Pretty tight quarters there. So there's going to be big holes that are punched on my hole punch machine, and then there's going to be 2 little holes between each big hole done with the awl. So now I'm here at my metal hole press machine. This thing can also set eyelets. I just got it and it was a really good purchase. Of course, the holes end up being a lot bigger than that little pen mark I made earlier, so you kind of have to see as you go how they are all looking in their placement to each other. Hey Dan, who are you dressed up as? Superman.
Yeah. And my buns came.
Yeah, you finally came, so you're not going to be disappointed anymore. Oh, great.
Oh, go up there. Go.
Lower and lift. Inhale and exhale.
Okay, so now for the next part of the broguing, I'm just going to be using this scratch awl to poke 2 tiny holes in between each of those big ones that I just did. Okay, so I'm at my dad's workshop now. We have the bandsaw all set up, and I'm just going to start tracing out my template for these heels, starting with the side view onto this wood that I'm going to use today. So when I actually cut this on the bandsaw, I'm going to aim to leave a little bit of a margin. My heel is now roughly cut out, and I'm just going to begin shaping it with this die grinder using this cylindrical piece. So these are the heels in question. You can see I did end up building them up with leather at the bottom to get them a little bit taller. So I've pretty much done everything I can do for the upper components of the shoes because I'm still waiting on this product to arrive in the mail to hopefully give the red leather this shinier finish. We'll see, but that hasn't arrived yet. So I'm gonna move on to carving the insole. So I'm putting on my leather protective apron. I actually made this a few years ago out of sheepskin and dyed it myself and riveted it and everything myself. So I have to wear this because I'm going to be using knife strokes that actually cut towards my body, and obviously I need to wear something protective. So I have my insole leather soaking. It was soaking for a while in this water because it's pretty thick leather, and so I need to soak it to make it more malleable and easier to cut. So the toe puff is a piece of reinforcement leather that is going to go over the toe area when I'm lasting the shoe. So I guess I could go back to my story here. In the way we were brought up, our parents were very encouraging of us following our creative impulses and making a career out of it. But I was dealing with this, existential sort of questioning and depressive feeling. And I remember I was at lunch once in the staff room of this art school where we were allowed to warm up our lunch in the microwave and things, and I heard some of the teachers at this school talking. They were talking about their own personal art, and they're like, I mean, it's not like you can actually make a living off of art, right? And I guess the other one was kind of agreeing, and I guess they were both, saying like, obviously that's why we became teachers, because of course you can't make a living off of art. I just found that so gutting, hearing that day. The combination of being in this new unfamiliar environment, being way outside my comfort zone, in a place that was supposed to be all about valuing art for its own sake, especially like classical art, not even modern art. And here are these teachers in this school talking to each other saying, I mean, of course you can't make a living off of art. Because I guess prior to that, my goal had been to make a living off of art. And I have no doubt that probably played a part in me moving away from it at that point. Okay, I think that's good. Later, when this is actually on the shoe, I'm gonna do a little sanding to get it thinner in certain areas, so I think that's good for now. Did you miss Mommy, Leia? Did you miss Mommy? Yeah, we're gonna clean up the house together. Hi, stand up. What?
I didn't.
Oh yeah, we got we can shoot your head.
Hi.
Okay, so now I'm just going to be laying this leather over the bottom of my last, getting it to begin to form to this curved shape. And I'm going to put 3 nails in to hold it through this entire shoemaking process. Here's the one. My hands are a bit cold. This leather is almost a bit too wet, a little too floppy. Basically, you just get it down closer and closer to the shape that you want it to be, which is the exact shape of the insole, and then the knife cuts become more and more precise. Now I'm going to be wrapping this thing tightly into the shape of the bottom of the last, letting it dry like that, so it will have this lovely, perfect insole shape. I think I might have cut it a tiny bit small in some places, so hopefully it doesn't shrink down too much more when it dries, but... One of the last things I can do at this point before I can actually move on to sewing together the uppers is finishing the tongue. So I'm going to be using my trusty old Janome machine that I've had since I was about 8 years old to do a zigzag stitch. Since I'm not doing this on a serger, of course the serger will trim the edges for you as you go, so you don't have any of these threads hanging off. but my sewing machine will not. So I'm just going to do that ahead of time because I don't want any of this fabric sticking out from the outside. Okay, so I'm pretty much ready to sew here. So I'm using my overcast foot, which just helps you sew along. So it's going to take a while here. Hi, buddy. Hi. So I have a very busy life as a mom of 5 and an entrepreneur, and I also have so many creative projects in my brain at a time that it can just be overwhelming. I'd like to introduce the sponsor of today's video, Milanote, who is a lifesaver for this kind of problem. I am a visual thinker, and Milanote helps me organize my ideas visually, along with all of the links, inspirational images, notes to myself, and doodles that I need to bring my ideas into physical reality. I have been so pleasantly surprised at how intuitive and simple Milanote is to use. Whether you prefer creating your boards from a template or working with just something completely blank like I do, there are so many options. I have so many varied interests, and Milanote is so validating for people like me. I can have different folders for my different creative projects like shoemaking, corset making, or dressmaking. Within each folder, I can have boards and subboards to organize my thoughts and then gather and symphonize the details of each given project. So this is my main board at the moment to plan my next complex project, which will be a beautiful flat-fronted Edwardian corset, also known as an S-bend corset, that I have been drooling over, like wanting to make this pattern for about 4 years now. I have been inspired by these old photos of Edwardian corsets, and on this board I can compile my overall just inspirational photos, as well as the color scheme, the exact fabrics I'm thinking of using, and I can also include questions about the project and notes to myself. For me, sometimes simply writing down a list of unknowns and questions about a project is enough to get my brain working on a solution. So this is wonderful. So in this subboard, I have compiled all of the exact material links that I thus far believe I will be using. Using Milanote's super handy web clipper extension, gathering these links with a handy automatic photo has never been so easy. Milanote also allows you to collaborate with others for projects, which can serve you both in your creative projects as well as more business-like ventures. Finally, Milanote is available for free with no time limit. Sign up using the link in the description and start your next creative project. Thanks for sponsoring this video, Milanote. Okay, so it has been quite a while since I was last in my studio talking to you guys about this boot project. So a lot has happened since then. I have completely finished sewing together what's called the uppers. This is how they turned out. I still do have to add a button on this side, but I have these 2 buttons on just to help hold it closed once I start the next stage. There were a lot of mishaps that happened. The main one being that I realized once I was basically done that the top circumference of the boot wasn't going to be large enough to be able to be pulled on and off my foot, which it's meant to do. So I had to add this basically extension to the top and also an extension to the cuffs. This extension and this gap will be covered by the cuffs, which will be over this, but it was a very stressful prospect to have to change that. But thankfully it's coming along fine. If anything, I want to make another pair of boots just in this like exact same design right after this to like take away all the lessons that I learned on this pair and hopefully make an even better pair. So here's my last. It is covered in tape. I don't think I've talked about this because I've had a lot of problems with almost every pair of shoes I've made with the shoes getting, essentially, I'm assuming they get a little bit glued to the last itself, and then it's very hard to get the last out when I'm all done. And these lasts do have a lot of leather that I glued on to build them up to make them a little bigger in some areas, and I feel like the leather made it a little more porous and more likely to get glued to the shoe, basically. So I covered it with this electrical tape to have a smoother surface. I don't even care about like getting this powdery. I just really don't want my shoes to get glued to this last because that is awful. This really goes against my nature of being so finicky. But pays off in the end. One of the woes that I came across on the first boot I lasted is I found that for some reason I don't seem to have enough of what's called lasting allowance. I have no idea why that is, but next time I will be adding an even more generous lasting allowance. Especially because this leather is fairly fragile. Okay, I'm just looking centered. Yes. Okay, so that's looking pretty centered. So I'm going to go ahead and continue lasting this, and then I'll talk to you when I talk to you next. Come on, buddy! You can do it! Edward and I made it across. Finally, we found a place to cross the little river. He needs some taller rubber boots, and I need rubber boots, period. Did you make it there already?
Yeah.
And then you came back to find us?
Yeah.
Yeah, because me and Edward were taking a long time to cross the river. Okay, so now that I've got the rough lasting of the shoe finished, it's time to start doing the detailed lasting, where I start lasting the individual elements like the lining and the stiffener and the outer part, each separately. Actually, now that I think about it, I think I'm just going to work with these 2 layers as one for now. And then later I will peel back the black layer just to trim up the stiffener. And it's cramped here. I need to get another pair of pliers. So I've gotten this shoe pretty much to a point where I'd like to let it sit now overnight to dry. So I have the toe puff in place, which is basically another stiffener, but for the toe area that you last separately. I'm going to let that dry, and then tomorrow I will trim off all of these wrinkly edges. Sorry, the puppy's barking outside. We're gonna let her in a moment. You're so loud! Do you want to be in the video? Are you still filming?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, of course I am.
Okay. I'd like to get the first coat of black paint on this wooden heel. So you'll remember earlier in the video, we showed you how I was carving the wooden heels. I did end up adding like some layers of leather to the bottom to make it a bit taller than I'd initially carved it. So lesson learned for next time. But now I'm going to be coating it with several layers of this black shiny enamel paint. This is my first time doing a wooden heel like this. Actually, I've only ever done one other pair of shoes with wooden heels, period, and those ones were wrapped in leather, which is the more common type of wooden heel that you see in historical shoes. I am going with the enameled version because I think that was more common on these, and I just wanted to try it. Okay, so that first coat is on. I'm just gonna let it dry, and I think I'm good for today's session of boot making. Aggie. We're gonna make a Batman helmet mask today with this leather.
And the Spider-Man one.
And a Spider-Man one out of this red leather. Made it with your new mask?
Yeah!
So Joe's got a Spider-Man mask, and we got a pattern made for Noah's Batman mask, which is a little more complex.
And for Dan's book.
And for Dan's book cover, he's gonna make a leather hand-stitched book. Okay, so now I am stitching the boot together. So I have peeled back this little lip that I showed you carving earlier, and I have poked a bunch of holes, and the approach that I found, much to my excitement and joy, that is actually working for this, well, in this case it's not going through, but it's using fishing line, because the fishing line is long enough that I can sew even right in at the toe. I'm sewing from the outside of the shoe to the inside, and normally I wouldn't be able to reach that far in, but the fishing line is long enough that, well, you'll see how it works. So I stick in the fishing line, it's long enough that I can pull it out, and then I have a thread on the inside of the shoe that I loop through that fishing line, pull it out just a little bit, and then pull this outside thread through it and give them both a tug, which forms a lock stitch or a chain stitch basically. So while we're here, I may as well wrap up basically my creative life story that I was telling. It's been a while since I told the last installment of that, but I believe I left off with me getting married and us starting our family. And so my creativity, certainly my painting, went underground for quite a while. But really, it was kind of being manifested through motherhood at that time. But it wasn't too long before I started having an interest in sewing my own clothes, and especially in making my own patterns. That just really appealed to me. I took out a bunch of books from the library on sewing and pattern making and design, and just jumped right into it. I was quite atrocious at making clothes at first, and I'm always embarrassed when I look back on pictures of myself and see the early things that I wore and I was so proud of, but that's just how we learn. So it wasn't until 2020, right before having my 4th child, that I first became aware that shoemaking at home was even possible. So I've applied some contact cement to this lip. I'm letting that cure, and while I'm waiting on that, I'm putting in the nails on the inside of the shoe that will be helping to hold the heel in place apart from the contact cement. So I have these nails, these special nails for holding in heels, and this very nice upholstery hammer that has magnetic tips and it reaches in the shoe really well. This is terrifying. It's a little less terrifying than the first time I did this, but I am always scared that the nails will like pop out the side of the heel. Let's just see if we can trace out some of these pieces today. What do you think of your book, Dan?
Good.
Good?
Yeah,
Show it to everyone.
Batman, because
Show them the stitches that we did.
The real life Batman didn't have this Batman.
Yeah, and show them the inside of the stitches. Wow, great job. Now you have your own leather book. This is only my 2nd time doing this kind of maneuver to a shoe sole, so I did make some mistakes when cutting this lip. It's quite tricky to do, so it's not as perfect as it could be, but that's okay. Like here's a little spot, needs a little extra glue. Okay, so I finished sewing the boot all together. So now I'm just sewing the lining to the outer leather around the top edge before I'm going to attach the cuff. So I'm just clipping this cuff in. It's quite stressful because the cuff is just a smidgen too wide for the actual top of the boot that I'm attempting to clip it in. So there's kind of like excess that I'm having to ease in here. So there's not hopefully going to be any wrinkles or anything when I'm done. And hopefully when I'm done sewing, the cuff will flip out and be the right way around. This is scary. So we're really putting this machine to the test here because this is very thick what I'm sewing through. That's another thing. On the original boot, the black part of the cuff was cut down a bit shorter. So the stitching line here wasn't having to go through so many layers, which in my case it is. Just want to make sure I'm leaving the same amount of length. And I made it. Made it all the way around. So now is the moment of truth. Let's flip this out and just make sure it's the right way around. It's a little tough to turn. Ah, it is the right way around. Hallelujah. Noah, what did you get done today, buddy?
Cutting out the pieces for my Batman costume.
Can I see them?
This is one piece.
And where's that gonna go on the helmet?
With eye holes.
Yeah. Now I think I'll go home and have a little nap. Okay, so the next step, the last step actually pretty much, is just sanding off the surface grain layer of this leather, and then I will be painting it. I decided to go ahead and paint the soles, like the entire soles in front of the heel, bright red, because I figured on what other shoe can you get away with a luxurious looking bright red shiny sole than these shiny black and red shoes, boots. So I'm using this Walk On Red product from Angelus, which is actually designed to refurbish luxury shoes that come with a red sole, and maybe it's worn away, but I'm going to use it to make boots with a red sole. So I finished the first coat on that boot that I was just showing you. This is what it looks like. So this is the boot that I already coated yesterday. I gave it a couple coats, and so I'm just gonna give it a fine sanding. Actually, in this instance, it's a little rough here, so I'm using a bit of a coarser grit of sandpaper. And then I'm gonna give it another coat of the red. Okay, just give this one another coat now. So as you can see from having watched this video, it is entirely possible, even for a busy mom of 5 like myself, to cause yourself an immense amount of stress with a very complicated and overambitious leatherwork project. No, but seriously, I loved this project. It did cause me a ton of stress, but there's just something about shoemaking where I just feel like it's in my blood and I've just like got to do it. And thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope you found it enjoyable, and I'll see you on the next video.